The mahogany conference table stretched between us like a chasm, its polished surface reflecting the overhead lights in wavering pools that hurt to look at directly. I sat with my hands folded in my lap, feeling the worn fabric of my only suit jacket, the same one I'd worn to Dad's funeral 3 weeks ago, scratch against my wrists. Across from me, my brother Marcus adjusted his Patek Philippe watch, the kind that cost more than I'd made in the past 2 years combined. His lawyer, a sharp-eyed woman named Patricia Vance, sat beside him with a leather portfolio that probably cost what I paid in monthly rent. Preparing and narrating this type of story takes a lot of time and effort. If you like the story, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. If you want to watch every story of our channel, turn on the bell icon. My lawyer was my college roommate's cousin, a general practitioner named Danny Reeves who mostly handled traffic tickets and small claims disputes. He'd agreed to come as a favor, charging me $200 he knew I didn't really have. Danny kept glancing at his phone under the table, probably wondering why he'd agreed to waste his Thursday afternoon in the downtown offices of Whitmore and Associates, where the carpet was so thick it swallowed the sound of footsteps and the art on the walls had those little plaques with artists' names I'd never heard of. "Let's begin," said Gerald Whitmore himself, Dad's attorney for 32 years. He was 70-something, with silver hair precisely parted and reading glasses that hung from a gold chain around his neck. He'd known me since I was 8 years old, had been at my high school graduation, had sent flowers when Mom died. Now he looked at me with something that might have been pity or might have been professional detachment. I couldn't tell anymore. Gerald opened a burgundy folder and cleared his throat. The sound echoed in the silence that followed. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Seattle sprawled below us, the Space Needle visible in the distance, Puget Sound glittering like hammered silver under the October sun. I'd grown up in this city, knew its rhythms and moods, but I'd never been this high up before. 14th floor, the kind of altitude reserved for people who'd made it. "The last will and testament of Robert James Stevens," Gerald began, and I felt something tighten in my chest at the sound of Dad's full name. Robert James Stevens. Bob to his friends. Mr. Stevens to his employees. Dad to Marcus and me, though he'd been so much more present for Marcus than he'd ever been for me. Marcus leaned back in his chair, the leather creaking softly. He was 38, 5 years older than me, and he looked every inch the successful executive in his Tom Ford suit and Italian leather shoes. His hair was cut in that expensive way that looked effortless but probably required monthly maintenance at some place where they served you scotch while you waited. He'd been groomed for this moment his entire life. Literally. Dad had started taking him to the office when he was 12, teaching him the business, introducing him to clients, preparing him to take over Stevens Industrial Solutions, the commercial construction supply company Dad had built from nothing into a $68 million enterprise. I, on the other hand, had been the disappointment. The artist, the dreamer, the one who'd chosen philosophy over business administration, who'd wanted to teach instead of sell, who'd spent his 20s in coffee shops writing essays about Kierkegaard and Camus that nobody read. Dad had tried to hide his disappointment, but I'd seen it in the way his eyes would glaze over when I talked about my work, in the way he'd changed the subject whenever I mentioned my adjunct teaching position at the community college. "To my son Marcus Stevens," Gerald read, his voice steady and practiced, "I leave Stevens Industrial Solutions in its entirety, including all assets, properties, accounts, and holdings associated with the company. Additionally, I leave him the house on Mercer Island, the vacation property in Whistler, and the contents of my personal investment portfolio, which as of this date totals approximately $8.3 million. Marcus didn't react. He'd known this was coming. We'd all known. This was simply the official confirmation of what had been obvious my entire life. Marcus was the golden child, the heir, the one who'd followed the path Dad had laid out. I was the afterthought. I felt Danny shift beside me, uncomfortable. He'd told me on the way here that he'd seen worse, that at least I'd be getting something, that some families cut people out entirely. His optimism felt misplaced now. Sitting in this room that smelled of expensive leather and furniture polish, watching my brother inherit an empire. "Marcus will assume the role of CEO and majority shareholder," Gerald continued, "with full authority to make all business decisions as he sees fit. The transition is to be immediate, and all existing board members have already been notified of this arrangement. Immediate. Dad had been dead for 21 days, and Marcus had probably been running the company since before the funeral. I'd seen him on his phone during the reception, taking calls in Dad's study while relatives I barely knew picked at catered sandwiches and shared stories about a man I wasn't sure I'd ever really understood. "To my son James Stevens," Gerald said, and I straightened in my chair, forcing myself to pay attention. Here it came, the token gesture, the nominal amount that would let Dad's estate close without guilt, that would prove he hadn't forgotten about me entirely. I leave the contents of my personal office safe, specifically the brown leather briefcase marked with his initials, along with a letter to be read privately. That was it. A briefcase. While Marcus got $68 million and multiple properties and a company with 300 employees, I got a briefcase. I felt something hot and sharp rise in my throat. Not quite anger, not quite grief. Something in between that tasted like copper and old resentment. "Are you fucking kidding me?" The words were out before I could stop them. Gerald looked at me over his reading glasses. "James, a briefcase. He left me a briefcase." I could hear my voice rising, cracking at the edges. "Do you know what I do for a living, Gerald? I teach Introduction to Philosophy to hungover 19-year-olds at North Seattle Community College. I make $32,000 a year. I share a studio apartment with a guy who plays drums at 2 in the morning. And Dad left me a briefcase." "James, please," Danny said softly, his hand on my arm. But I couldn't stop. All the years of trying to be okay with being the lesser son, the one who didn't fit the mold, the one who'd chosen differently and paid for it in 1,000 small ways, it was all pouring out now, here in this room with its expensive carpet and its view of the city I'd never be able to afford. Marcus gets everything. Like always. The company, the money, the houses, plural by the way, and I get a fucking briefcase. What am I supposed to do with that? Is there cash in it? Stock certificates? Or is it just Dad's way of saying one last time that I was the wrong kind of son? Marcus finally spoke, his voice calm and measured. "James, I'm sure there's a reason. Don't." I held up my hand. "Don't pretend you're surprised. Don't pretend this isn't exactly what you expected. You've been waiting for this your entire life. You probably had your acceptance speech ready before Dad even got sick." "That's not fair," Marcus said. But there was no heat in it. He was too controlled for heat, too trained in corporate diplomacy to show real emotion. Or maybe he just didn't care enough to fight. "Fair? You want to talk about fair?" I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Fair would have been Dad noticing I existed. Fair would have been him coming to one of my lectures or asking about my dissertation or acknowledging that maybe, just maybe, there was more than one way to be successful. "He was proud of you," Marcus said, and I wanted to believe the lie in his voice but couldn't. "He didn't know me. He knew you. Spent every weekend with you. Took you tow games and business dinners and taught you everything he knew. Me? I got awkward lunches twice a year where he'd ask how school was going and check his phone every 5 minutes. Gerald cleared his throat again. "Gentlemen, I understand this is emotional, but we need to complete the reading. What else is there?" I asked, sinking back into my chair. The fight was draining out of me, leaving behind only exhaustion. "What other scraps did he leave me?" "The briefcase and the letter," Gerald repeated. "That's all that's specifically designated for you. However, there's also a trust fund that was established when you were born, $30,000, which you're entitled to access now." $30,000. It sounded like a lot until you did the math. Until you compared it to 68 million. Until you realized it was roughly what Dad probably spent on a single business dinner at El Gaucho. "Great," I said flatly. "I can almost pay off my student loans." "James, you're being childish," Marcus said, and something in his tone, that slight edge of condescension, that hint of impatience, made me really look at him for the first time since we'd sat down. He wasn't grieving. That's what struck me. Our father had been dead for 3 weeks, and Marcus looked like he'd just closed a successful deal. No redness around his eyes, no weight loss from stress, no visible signs of loss. He'd probably already redecorated Dad's office, updated the company website with his photo, started implementing whatever changes he'd been planning for years. Childish, I repeated. Right? I'm childish because I'm upset that my father left me nothing while you get everything. That's childish. He left you something, Marcus said, gesturing at the briefcase that Gerald's assistant had just brought into the room. A worn brown leather thing with my initials, JS, embossed on the side in faded gold letters. It looked old, the leather cracked and darkened with age, the brass clasps tarnished. Maybe you should look at it before you have a meltdown. The briefcase sat on the table between us, and I stared at it like it might contain a bomb. It was maybe 18 inches wide, 12 inches tall, the kind of thing businessmen carried in the 50s before everyone switched to aluminum and then to backpacks. It had weight to it. I could tell from the way Gerald's assistant had set it down carefully with both hands. The letter, Gerald said, holding out a cream-colored envelope with my name, written on it in Dad's distinctive scrawl. Robert specified that you should read this before opening the briefcase. I took the envelope, felt the thickness of the paper, the quality of it. Even his stationery was expensive. My hands were shaking slightly as I broke the wax seal. An actual wax seal, red with Dad's initials pressed into it. So theatrical. So like him to make even a letter feel like a corporate pronouncement. Would you like privacy? Gerald asked. No, I said. Whatever it says, they'll find out anyway. I unfolded the letter. Dad's handwriting filled 2 pages. The ink dark blue, the lines straight and even. He'd always had perfect penmanship, the kind they didn't teach anymore. Dear James, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I imagine you're angry. You have every right to be. I know what the will says, and I know how it looks. Marcus getting the company, the money, everything tangible, while you get an old briefcase. It seems cruel. It seems unfair. It seems like one final confirmation that you were never quite good enough, never quite what I wanted you to be. That's not what this is. James, I've made many mistakes as a father. I know I wasn't there for you the way I was for Marcus. I know I pushed you away when you chose philosophy over business, when you wanted to teach instead of sell, when you became someone I didn't know how to relate to. I was wrong. You weren't the failure. I failed to see that you were brave in ways I never was, that you chose meaning over money, that you became exactly who you were meant to be despite my disappointment rather than because of my approval. The briefcase contains something I've kept hidden for 33 years. Something I couldn't give Marcus because he wouldn't understand it, wouldn't know what to do with it, wouldn't see its value. But you will. You'll understand why I'm giving you this instead of money or property or stocks. You'll understand because you're the son who reads Kierkegaard, who thinks about meaning and purpose, who chose a harder path because it was the right one. Inside that briefcase is the truth about where Stevens Industrial Solutions really came from. Not the story I told the business journals or the board of directors or even your mother. The real story. The one that cost me everything and gave me everything. The one that will explain why I couldn't be a better father to you, and why I'm giving you the only inheritance that matters. Don't open it here. Take it home. Take your time. And when you've seen what's inside, you'll have a choice to make. What you do with this information is entirely up to you. You can destroy it, you can use it, you can let it change your life or let it fade away. But know this. I'm trusting you with the thing I've protected most carefully. The secret I've carried alone since before you were born. I'm sorry I wasn't the father you needed. I'm sorry I didn't tell you more often that I was proud of you, because I was, James. I was proud that you had the courage to be yourself. I just didn't know how to say it. The briefcase is yours. What you do with it is yours. But please wait until you're alone. And please, don't let Marcus know what's inside until you've decided what to do. I love you. I should have said it more often. Dad. I read the letter twice, my eyes blurring on the second pass. The room was silent except for the hum of the heating system and the distant sound of traffic from the street below. When I finally looked up, everyone was watching me. Marcus with curiosity, Gerald with that same unreadable expression, Danny with concern, Patricia with the blank professionalism of someone billing by the hour. What does it say? Marcus asked. It's private, I said, folding the letter carefully and putting it back in the envelope. James, come on. What's in the briefcase? I don't know. I haven't opened it. Well, open it now. I looked at the briefcase, at its worn leather and tarnished clasps, and felt something shift inside me. Some combination of curiosity and fear and a strange protectiveness I didn't understand yet. Dad had asked me not to open it here, had asked me to wait, and for the first time in my life I felt like I owed him that respect. "No," I said. "No," Marcus repeated, as if the word didn't make sense. "Dad asked me to wait, so I'm waiting." Marcus laughed, a short bark of disbelief. "You're joking. You've been complaining for the past 20 minutes about getting a briefcase, and now you won't even open it." "I'll open it when I'm ready." "This is ridiculous," Marcus said, looking at Patricia, who shrugged slightly. "Gerald, can you make him open it? What if there's something in there that affects the estate distribution?" Gerald removed his glasses and polished them with a cloth from his pocket. "The letter specifies that the contents are James's property, to do with as he wishes. Marcus, you've received your inheritance. This is James's." "But what if—" "Marcus," I interrupted, standing up and picking up the briefcase. It was heavier than I'd expected, solid and real in my hands. "You got the company. You got the money. You got everything. Let me have this one thing without making it about you." Something flickered across Marcus's face. Surprise, maybe, or hurt. We'd never been close, had never really fought because fighting requires caring enough to engage. But this felt like the first honest thing that had passed between us in years. "Fine," Marcus said, leaning back in his chair. "Take your mystery briefcase. I hope it's full of stock certificates or bearer bonds or something actually useful. Because if it's just Dad's old business cards and sentimental crap, you're going to feel pretty stupid." "Maybe," I said. "Or maybe it's exactly what I need." I shook Gerald's hand, thanked Danny for coming, and walked out of that conference room with the briefcase under my arm. The elevator ride down felt longer than it should have, the numbers counting down from 14 to ground level like a timer running out on something I didn't understand yet. In the lobby, I pushed through the revolving doors into October air that smelled like rain and exhaust and the salt of the sound. My car was parked 3 blocks away, a 2003 Honda Civic with a dent in the passenger door and an inspection sticker that had expired 2 months ago. I'd been meaning to get it renewed, but there was always something more pressing, some other small emergency that ate the $30 it would cost. I put the briefcase on the passenger seat, buckled it in like it might fly away, and sat there for a long moment with my hands on the steering wheel. The letter was in my jacket pocket, and I could feel its weight against my chest. "Don't let Marcus know what's inside until you've decided what to do." Why? What could possibly be in an old briefcase that required secrecy? What truth about Stephen's Industrial Solutions had Dad been hiding for 33 years? I started the car, listened to the engine cough before catching, and pulled out into afternoon traffic. The drive back to my apartment in Greenwood took 40 minutes, past the university district where students walked with the easy confidence of people whose futures were still undefined, past coffee shops and bookstores and Thai restaurants I'd been meaning to try but couldn't afford. My neighborhood was one of the city's forgotten corners, where rent was almost reasonable and the buildings dated back to the 70s. All brown siding and parking lots cracked by tree roots. My roommate Tyler's drums sat silent in the living room when I walked in. A small miracle. He worked nights at a warehouse in Soto, slept until 3 most afternoons, then practiced from 4 until whenever I threatened to call the landlord. The apartment smelled like old coffee and the curry Tyler had made 2 days ago, and the November light coming through our single window was already fading into early dusk. I set the briefcase on our second-hand dining table, a folding thing from IKEA that wobbled if you leaned on it wrong. Then I sat down, stared at it, and tried to imagine what could possibly be inside that would be worth more than $68 million. Because that's what Dad's letter implied, wasn't it? That this briefcase contained something valuable enough to be the real inheritance, the one that mattered more than money or property or companies. The clasps were stiff with age, but they opened with a satisfying click. I lifted the lid slowly, half expecting some kind of movie moment. Golden light streaming out, angels singing. My life changed in an instant. Instead, I saw papers. Lots of them. Some yellowed with age, some crisp and white, all organized in folders with labels written in Dad's handwriting. On top was a black and white photograph, 8 by 10, slightly faded. It showed a young man, maybe 25, with dark hair and wide eyes, standing in front of a building I didn't recognize. He was thin, almost gaunt, wearing clothes that looked like they'd seen better days. Behind him, the building's windows were boarded up, and graffiti covered the lower walls. I picked up the photo, turned it over. On the back, in Dad's handwriting, Seattle, 1992, before everything changed. I'd been born in 1992. This photo was from before I existed, from some version of Dad's life I knew nothing about. The official story was that he'd started Stevens Industrial Solutions in 1990 with a small loan from my grandfather, built it up slowly through hard work and smart decisions, turned it into the success it was today. But the man in this photo didn't look like a successful entrepreneur. He looked desperate. I set the photo aside and pulled out the first folder. Inside were legal documents, contracts, agreements, letters on corporate letterhead. I started reading, my hands getting colder with each page, my breath catching in my throat as the truth began to reveal itself. And by the time I finished the first folder, I understood. I understood why Dad had hidden this for 33 years. Why he'd given it to me and not Marcus. Why he'd asked me to wait until I was alone. Because the company my brother had just inherited, the $68 million empire that bore our family name, wasn't ours at all. It had never been ours. And the briefcase I held contained proof that would destroy everything Marcus had just gained. Everything our family had built. Everything the Stevens name meant in Seattle's business community. I stayed up all night reading. The folders were labeled chronologically, starting with 1991 and ending with 2024, each one containing a piece of a puzzle I hadn't known existed. By the time dawn light started filtering through our apartment's single window, turning the sky from black to gray to pale orange, I'd assembled the truth into something coherent, something that made terrible sense. My father hadn't started Stevens Industrial Solutions. He'd stolen it. Not legally stolen, the contracts were all valid, all properly executed, all technically legitimate. But morally stolen, ethically stolen, in the way that only someone who understood philosophy would recognize as theft. Because the company had been founded by two people, not one. My father and another man named Vincent Chun. And Vincent Chen's name had been systematically erased from every document, every press release, every article about the company's history. The early contracts showed it clearly. Stevens and Chun Industrial Solutions. 50-50 partnership. Equal capital contributions, $20,000 each, scraped together from family loans and credit cards. Equal decision-making power. Equal ownership. The articles of incorporation were dated January 1990, signed by both men, notarized, filed with the state of Washington. Then, in 1992, a new set of documents. A buyout agreement. Vincent Chun selling his 50% stake in the company for $100,000. A fraction of what it was already worth, let alone what it would become. His signature was there, witnessed and notarized. But there were other documents too, ones that Vincent Chun had never seen, would never have signed. Documents that told a different story. I found them in a folder labeled simply 1992, personal. Letters from a bank, threatening foreclosure on a house. Medical bills from Swedish Medical Center, emergency room visits, oncology consultations. The amounts were staggering, 30,000, 50,000, numbers that added up faster than any normal person could pay. And a handwritten note on yellow legal paper, in writing I didn't recognize. Bob, I can't fight you and the cancer at the same time. May needs treatment we can't afford. The house is going into foreclosure next month. I'll sign whatever you want if you give me enough to save my family. I know what this company could be. I know what you're taking from me. But what choice do I have? You knew exactly when to offer this. You knew I was desperate. I'll hate you for it, but I'll sign. I hope it's worth it. There was no signature, but the handwriting matched Vincent's on the early partnership documents. The date was March 15, 1992. 3 months after Vincent's wife May had been diagnosed with stage 3 breast cancer. 2 weeks before their house was scheduled for foreclosure. 1 week before the buyout agreement was signed. My father had waited, had watched his partner struggle, watched him drown in medical debt and mortgage payments, and had waited until the moment when Vincent had no choice, no leverage, no way to say no. Then he'd offered $100,000, enough to cover the most pressing debts, enough to buy a few months of treatment, enough to keep the house. Not enough to be fair. Not enough to reflect what the company was worth or what it would become. Just enough to force a yes. The next folder contained financial records from 1992 to 2000. I watched Stevens Industrial Solutions grow from a small supplier with 3 employees into a regional force with 40 employees and $5 million in annual revenue. I watched the contracts get bigger, the clients get more prestigious, the money multiply. And I knew that half of it should have been Vincent Chen's. Half of every dollar, every success, every triumph. But Vincent's name appeared nowhere. The company history on the website, in press releases, in the business journals, it all said the same thing. Robert Stevens, founder and CEO, built this company from nothing through determination and vision. Except it wasn't from nothing. It was from stealing someone's future when they were too desperate to defend it. I found a private investigator's report from 1998. Dad had hired someone to find out what happened to Vincent Chun. The report was clinical, factual, devastating. Vincent Chun, age 38, currently employed as night shift supervisor at Pacific Metals, South Seattle. Divorced from Mei Chun, née Wang, in 1997. No children, daughter stillborn 1993, no subsequent pregnancies. Current residence, studio apartment in White Center, monthly rent $650. Credit score, 542. Bankruptcy filed 1995, discharged 1996. No savings, no investments, no property. Subject works 6 nights a week, picks up overtime when available. Associates describe him as quiet, reliable, keeps to himself. No indication he has pursued legal action or contacted Robert Stevens since buyout. The daughter was stillborn. May had died in 1996, another document, another medical report showing that the cancer came back, that the $100,000 had bought time but not a cure. And Vincent had ended up alone, broke, working nights at a warehouse, living in a studio apartment in one of Seattle's roughest neighborhoods, while my father built an empire on the foundation they'd created together. The later folders were thinner. Annual updates on Vincent's whereabouts, always brief, always sad. He'd had a heart attack in 2003, survived but with permanent damage. He'd been laid off in 2008 during the recession, struggled to find work, ended up driving for a delivery service. In 2015, he'd moved to subsidized housing near Everett. The most recent report was from 2023. Vincent Chun, age 63, currently residing at Evergreen Assisted Living, Everett, Washington. Subject suffered a stroke in 2022, resulting in partial paralysis and speech difficulties. He receives disability benefits and Medicaid. Facility staff report he has no visitors, no living relatives, no significant personal possessions. Cognitive function appears intact but communication is difficult. Quality of life appears poor. The last document in that folder was a bank statement from an account I'd never known existed. The account holder was RJS Family Trust. Designated beneficiary, Vincent Chun. The balance was $847,000. Monthly deposits had been made since 1992, varying in amount but averaging around $2,000. 32 years of deposits. 32 years of guilt money, accumulating in an account that Vincent Chun apparently didn't know existed. I sat back from the table, my hands shaking. The October sun was fully up now, streaming through the window, making the papers in front of me look golden and precious when they were actually evidence of 3 decades of betrayal. My phone showed it was 6:47 a.m. I'd been reading for almost 12 hours. Tyler emerged from his bedroom, yawning, scratching his stomach through a faded Soundgarden t-shirt. He looked at me, at the papers spread across the table, at my face, and stopped. "Dude, you okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." "My father was a thief," I said. The words felt strange in my mouth, too big and too simple at the same time. Tyler poured himself coffee from the pot I'd made at 3 a.m., took a sip, made a face at how strong it was. What are you talking about? So I told him. Not everything, the full story would take hours, but the outline. The partnership. The buyout. Vincent Chen. The 32 years of silence and accumulated guilt money. Tyler listened, his coffee forgotten, his eyes getting wider. When I finished, he let out a low whistle. Holy shit, James. What are you going to do? I don't know. You have to tell someone, right? The police? A lawyer? Your brother. And say what? These contracts are all legal. Dad didn't break any laws. He exploited someone who was desperate. Took advantage of a situation. It's morally wrong, but I don't know if it's legally wrong. So he gets away with it? Your brother inherits a company that should be half Vincent's, and Vincent dies alone in some depressing assisted living place. I looked at the bank statement at that number, $847,000. There's money. Dad set aside money, almost $1 million. But Vincent doesn't know about it. Then tell him. It's not that simple. This money, it's hush money, basically. Guilt money. If I give it to Vincent, I'm validating what Dad did. I'm saying here, take this payoff and let us keep the company. But if I don't give it to him, he has nothing. He's dying alone with nothing while my brother lives in a mansion. Tyler sat down across from me, pushed aside some of the papers. What did your dad want you to do? Why did he give you this? That was the question I'd been avoiding all night. Why me? Why not Marcus? Why trust me with this truth instead of taking it to the grave? I said slowly, he wanted me to decide. He knew Marcus would bury it, would protect the company at all costs. But me, I'm the philosophy professor. I'm the one who thinks about ethics and morality and what it means to do the right thing. He gave me the choice he couldn't make himself. What choice? Whether to destroy the company or save Vincent Chun. Whether to tell the truth or protect the family. Whether to honor the law or honor justice. We sat in silence for a while, the morning sounds of the apartment building filtering through the walls. Toilets flushing, doors closing, someone's alarm going off repeatedly. Normal people starting normal days, unaware that a few feet away, someone was holding evidence that could unravel 3 decades of success and expose a founding lie. You have to talk to him, Tyler finally said. To Vincent. Before you decide anything, you have to talk to him. He was right. I couldn't make this decision in a vacuum, based on papers and reports and numbers. I needed to see Vincent Chen, to hear his story in his own words, however difficult his speech was now, to understand what this truth meant to the person it had been stolen from. I showered and changed into clean clothes, trying to wash away the smell of all-night reading and existential crisis. My reflection in the bathroom mirror looked haggard. Dark circles under my eyes, 3 days of beard growth, hair sticking up at angles I hadn't known were possible. I looked like what I was. A 33-year-old adjunct professor with no real job security, no savings, and now a burden of truth that felt heavier than any briefcase. The drive to Everett took an hour in morning traffic. I'd called ahead to Evergreen Assisted Living, explaining I was an old family friend, asking if I could visit. The woman on the phone had sounded surprised. Mr. Chan doesn't get many visitors. But she'd said visiting hours started at 9. Evergreen Assisted Living was exactly as depressing as the PI report had suggested. A squat building from the 70s, beige siding, small windows, a parking lot with cracks wide enough to swallow a tire. The front entrance smelled like industrial cleaner and something else. Something medicinal and tired that I associated with nursing homes and hospitals. Inside, fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and the walls were decorated with paintings of generic landscapes. Mountains, beaches, forests, the kind you bought in bulk to cover institutional walls. The woman at the front desk was maybe 60, with reading glasses on a chain and a sweater covered in cat hair. She looked up when I entered, offered a professional smile. Can I help you? I'm here to visit Vincent Chun. I called earlier. She checked her computer, nodded. Room 117 down that hall and to the left. He's usually awake by now, but he tires easily. Please keep your visit under an hour. Room 117 was at the end of a long corridor that smelled like lunch being prepared somewhere. Vegetables boiling, meat cooking, institutional food that tasted the same no matter what they called it. I knocked softly on the door, Heard nothing. Knocked again. "Come in," a voice said, slurred and difficult but unmistakably present. Vincent Chun sat in a wheelchair by the window, which looked out onto a parking lot and a dumpster enclosure. He was small and thin, his frame bent by the stroke, his left side clearly affected, the hand curled inward, the face drooping slightly. But his eyes were sharp, intelligent, watching me with curiosity and something else. Suspicion, maybe, or just the wariness of someone who'd learned that visitors usually brought bad news. "Mr. Chun," I said. "My name is James Stevens." The reaction was immediate and visceral. His right hand gripped the armrest of his wheelchair, his eyes widening. "Stevens," he repeated, the word distorted but clear enough. "Robert Stevens?" "His son. Robert was my father. He passed away 3 weeks ago." Vincent stared at me for a long moment, and I saw emotions flicker across his face too quickly to name. "Why, here." I pulled up the room's single visitor chair, an orange plastic thing that looked like it came from a school cafeteria. "Because I found something he left me, and I think you should know about it." "What?" "The truth about what happened in 1992. About the buyout. About everything." Vincent's face did something complicated then. Surprise and pain and anger and something that might have been relief. "Tell me," he said, and even with the slurred speech, I heard the weight of 32 years in those 2 words. So I told him. I told him about the briefcase, about the documents, about the truth that Dad had hidden for 3 decades. I told him about the bank account, about the $847,000 that had been sitting there accumulating interest for 32 years. And I told him what the private investigator reports had said, how Dad had kept track of him all this time, watching from a distance but never reaching out, never apologizing, never making it right. Vincent listened without interrupting, his good hand gripping the armrest so tightly his knuckles went white. When I finished, he was silent for so long I thought maybe he'd had another stroke, some catastrophic internal event that my words had triggered. But then he spoke, slowly and carefully, each word an effort. I knew, Vincent repeated, his voice steadier now, as if anger gave him strength. Not the money, but the timing. He waited, watched me drown. I leaned forward. I'm so sorry for what he did, for what my family built on. Don't. Vincent's good hand raised slightly. Not your fault. You weren't born yet. But I benefit from it. My whole life, everything I had. It came from what he took from you. Vincent's mouth twisted into something that might have been a smile. What did you have? Really? The question caught me off guard. I had a childhood, education, a father, even if he wasn't great at it. And now, teacher, poor. Yes. Then you understand. Not having, losing. He paused, gathering strength. Your brother gets everything. The company, the houses, the money. All of it. Vincent nodded slowly. Good businessman. Like your father. Does that matter? It was stolen. Legally. His. Each word was an effort, but Vincent pushed through. Courts wouldn't care. Too long ago. Contracts. Valid. So that's it? He just wins. Vincent looked out the window at the parking lot, at the dumpster enclosure, at the gray October sky. Already won. 30 years ago. I lost everything. Wife, daughter, company, myself. He turned back to me, and his eyes were wet. Do you know the worst part? I shook my head. I would have given it if he'd asked, if he'd said, Vincent, I need this more. I want it more. Please. I would have stepped aside. We were friends. I thought we were friends. The betrayal in his voice, even slurred, even broken, was crushing. This wasn't just about money or business. It was about trust, about friendship, about someone you believed in waiting for the perfect moment to destroy you. There's money, I said. Almost $1 million. He set it aside for you. I can transfer it today. You could. Could what? Vincent interrupted, his voice suddenly sharp. Buy better room? Hire nurse? For how long? Year? 2. He gestured at his paralyzed side. This body, failing. That money, guilt money. But it's yours. It should have been yours all along. No. Vincent's good hand hit the armrest. Mine was the company, the dream, building something, partner, friend. He took a shaky breath. The money is shame, is shame. I don't want it. I sat back, stunned. Then what do you want? Vincent was quiet for a long time, his eyes distant. When he finally spoke, his voice was softer, sadder. Truth, told. People know what he did, what I lost. Not just footnote, not just victim. I can't expose this without destroying the company. 300 people work there. My brother, your brother, Vincent said, got everything. Maybe he can lose something too. Know what it feels like? There was justice in that, a kind of biblical symmetry. But it felt hollow, vengeful. Is that really what you want? Revenge. Vincent met my eyes. I want to matter. Want my name remembered. Not just night shift supervisor. Was founder. Was dreamer. Was someone. And there it was. The real theft wasn't the money or the company. It was identity, legacy, the story of who Vincent Chun had been before everything fell apart. My father had taken that too, erased it from history, made himself the sole hero of a story that required 2 people. What if, I said slowly, there was a way to tell the truth without destroying everything? What if people could know who you were, what you did, without burning down what's been built? Vincent tilted his head. How? I thought about it, pieces clicking together. The company has a foundation. Dad set it up 10 years ago. Charitable giving, scholarships, community work. What if we renamed it the Stevens and Chun Foundation? What if we told your story, made it part of the official history? What if we used that guilt money, all of it, to create something in your name? Something that lasts. And your brother? Would he agree? He won't have a choice, because I have the documents, the proof, and I'll tell him that either he acknowledges you publicly, makes this right, or I go to the press with everything. The Seattle Times would love this story. Local empire built on betrayal. Vincent studied me. You would do that? To your brother? For you? Yes. Because it's right. Because you deserve to be remembered as more than someone who got screwed over. You deserve to be remembered as a founder. Something changed in Vincent's face then. Some wall coming down. Some long-held tension releasing. Your father, he said quietly, chose well, giving this to you. I don't know about that. He knew. Marcus would bury it. You're different, like I was. You care about more than money. We talked for another hour. Vincent told me about the early days, about the dreams he and my father had shared, about the friendship that had felt real before desperation and opportunity corrupted it. He told me about May, about their daughter they'd named Hope who never drew breath, about the slow collapse of everything he'd built. And he told me what he wanted, not revenge exactly, but recognition. A place in the story he'd been erased from. When I left Evergreen Assisted Living, the sun was high and bright, burning off the morning clouds. I sat in my car for a long time, thinking about choices and consequences, about the difference between legal and ethical, about what justice really meant when nobody's hands were clean. Then I called Marcus. The second meeting in Gerald Whitmore's office was smaller, just Marcus, Gerald, and me. I'd brought the briefcase and I'd brought a proposal. Marcus looked annoyed at being summoned, checking his Patek Philippe repeatedly, making it clear he had better things to do. This better be important, James. I have a board meeting in an hour. It's important, I said, and opened the briefcase. I watched Marcus's face as I explained. Watched him go from irritation to confusion to understanding to anger. He got redder as I talked, his jaw clenching, his hands forming fists. This is blackmail, he said when I finished. No, it's justice. Justice? You want to destroy everything Dad built because of some partnership that ended 30 years ago? Vincent signed the buyout. It was legal. It was legal theft. And I'm not trying to destroy anything. I'm trying to make it right. By holding the company hostage? By threatening to go public? By giving Vincent Chun what Dad should have given him 32 years ago? Recognition. Truth. A place in the story. Marcus stood up, pacing. Do you have any idea what this could do to the company's reputation? To our family name? Yes. And I also know what 300 employees depend on Stevens Industrial Solutions for their livelihoods. Which is why I'm not demanding we give Vincent half the company or shut it down. I'm asking you to acknowledge him. Rename the foundation. Use the guilt money Dad set aside to do something meaningful. Tell the truth. The truth will make us look like villains. Then we'll look like villains who made it right. Better than being villains who covered it up. Gerald cleared his throat. Marcus, I think James is offering you a reasonable solution. The alternative, if this story goes public without your cooperation, would be significantly worse. Marcus glared at both of us. But I could see him calculating, running the numbers, weighing options. That's what he did, cost-benefit analysis, risk assessment. And the risk of fighting me was greater than the risk of compliance. Fine, he finally said. The foundation gets renamed. We acknowledge Vincent in the company history. We use the money for. He gestured vaguely. Whatever charitable thing you want. But that's it. No other changes. No taking his name off anything else. And you visit him, I added. At least once. You look him in the eye and you apologize for what Dad did. That's not. Those are my terms, Marcus. All of them or none of them. He stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Maybe he hadn't. Maybe I'd always been the disappointing younger brother. The one who didn't matter. The one who could be ignored. Not anymore. Deal, Marcus said finally. Vincent Chen died 4 months later, in February, with me holding his good hand. The stroke had weakened him further, and pneumonia finished what time had started. But he died knowing his name would be remembered, that the Stevens and Chen Foundation would fund scholarships for kids like him. First generation, brilliant, broke. He died knowing the truth had been told. The Seattle Times ran the story a week after his death. The Forgotten Founder. How Vincent Chen's legacy lives on. It was honest about what Dad had done, about the buyout and the timing and the exploitation. But it was also honest about the reconciliation, about Marcus's public acknowledgement, about the foundation and the scholarships and the attempt, however late, to make things right. Marcus hated every minute of it. Hated the questions, the scrutiny, the way some clients looked at him differently. But the company survived. Thrived, even. Turns out people respected the transparency, the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. As for me, I used my $30,000 trust fund to pay off half my student loans. The other half I donated to the foundation in Vincent's name. I kept teaching introduction to philosophy to hungover 19-year-olds. Kept living in Greenwood with Tyler and his drums. Kept being the disappointment, the dreamer, the one who chose differently. But I slept better. Because I'd made the choice Dad couldn't make. Had told the truth he'd been too afraid to tell. The briefcase sat in my closet now, empty except for one photograph. Vincent Chun at 25, standing in front of a boarded-up building, before everything changed. Sometimes I took it out and looked at it, remembering that courage comes in many forms, and sometimes the hardest thing to inherit is the truth. Thanks so much for listening to this story. If you enjoyed James's journey and the moral dilemma he faced, I'd love to have you subscribe to the channel. We share stories like this every week. Tales about family secrets, difficult choices, and the moments that define who we really are. Hit that subscribe button, and if you're feeling generous, leave a comment telling me what you would have done in James's position. Would you have exposed the truth? Protected your brother? Made a different choice entirely? I read every comment, and I love hearing your perspectives.